Hi, I'm Mike Hogue from Lily House Permaculture, and I wanted to make a quick video here to tell you about how we were gardening all wrong and how we discovered that nature was gardening a whole lot better than us, and how we learned to model what nature was doing and put it to use in our gardens for gardens that were more productive with less need for weeding and watering and all of that work. So this is going to be a video about how to use ecological modeling to design plant communities called guilds. In particular, I'm going to take you through and show you our hedgerow and some of the other ecologically modeled guilds that we have here on our site. 15 years ago or so now, right after we discovered that we wanted to be doing permaculture with our lives, we had heard about the concept and heard that phrase that the people who were working on permaculture were doing the most important work in the world today, and we really agreed with that. So we thought we would prioritize two main things. One of those was foraging, and the other one was to learn a little bit more about gardening. So we went out and we started taking our first foraging class, and we started really getting into that. And one summer we made a goal to put something on our plate every week from foraging, and then the next year it became something pretty much every day throughout the growing season. At the same time, we started kind of interning and working part-time for local permaculture-inspired CSA. We learned a lot, but one of the things that we learned was that we would spend all of this time working on a crop. We'd be harvesting, say, black raspberries, and we would have spent the time in the spring doing the maintenance on that, doing the weeding, keeping that a nice weed-free product. And then after we'd do our harvesting, we'd go out on a bike ride or something, and we'd come to one of our foraging spots, and we would fill up buckets with black raspberries and blackberries growing wild. And no one there was doing any weeding. No one there was doing any of the kind of work that we had been doing. And we would go back there all season long. We would go back for blackberries, we would go back for grapes, we would go back for some of the wild apples to press cider. There were elderberries there. There were a variety of wild vegetables, including wild alliums and all sorts of wild greens there. There were milkweed pods which we would use. There was basically fruit and food all season long, and the only maintenance it was getting was maybe from the deer and the groundhogs occasionally coming to prune or fertilize it. And after a while of spending all this time doing hard work at the farm and then going foraging and harvesting all of these yields for no work, we figured out we're doing this wrong. We became really interested in this idea of creating gardens that look a whole lot more like the wild ecosystems where we were foraging. And as you can see here now, our gardens at Lily House look pretty much like that. They follow a lot of the same sorts of rules that you would see in similar ecologies. One of the best examples of this is this edible hedgerow, or Tapestry Hedge, which is designed pretty much off of that favorite bike trail where we used to go foraging to get black raspberries and all of this other stuff. So we basically love that spot so much that we recreated it right in our front yard. And as it turns out, we had designed this on paper after we moved in here, before we even bought our house. But then we went over to the bike trail across the street and found almost the exact same kind of ecosystem just growing right here, right next to us. So we were able to copy the species distribution and spacings that we would find in the wild, knowing that those spacings and those species would be able to be very productive for us with low maintenance right here on our very similar soils. That's something that we recommend for ecologically modeled guilds, is going out and seeing what does nature do on our kinds of soils. Model that, and you'll know you'll have something that's going to be very productive on your site. All you have to do is tweak the spacings and the light just a little bit. Behind me here is one of the very first guilds of this kind that we ever created. It's another nice ecologically modeled guild with a variety of native and edible plants. Every plant in that is useful to us in some way, and now our key maintenance issue is trying to tweak it to get plants to come in exactly the right quantities that we can use them sustainably, so that our interaction as just another species in the system becomes stable with what is naturally happening there. When we get that right, the only maintenance that this guild will require is harvest. In a lot of ways, the densities throughout our whole garden and layers of plants that you see look a whole lot like those that you'd find in natural ecosystems, but they've just been geared a little bit more towards productivity. We select out the things that we want to nurture a bit more over the course of the season and give them a little bit more space, but at the same time we try to maintain complete ground cover throughout the whole season. So where you don't see plants, you see really deep mulch, often as deep as a foot, all throughout the garden. And when things need a little more space, we give it to them, and in weather where things need a little more protection from the sun and the elements in order to thrive, we let them have that instead. We try to use the plants to give each of the individuals in the system what they need. So it's just a matter of kind of intuitively thinning out to get the best production and the best circumstances for every plant organically as it comes in through the garden. This also leaves a very diverse and beautiful, abundant, lush-looking system. And in the background, you see more of that edible hedgerow, sheltering the garden, giving it protection, and growing a lot of biomass to help feed our vegetable beds. Another nice example of really dense plantings that, in a way, are just always a hair away from what you would see in the wild with natural plants competing against each other in a diverse ecology. And here's another famous plant community found in our biome. It's something that I've run into in the wild all over the place. In fact, there's a version of this just less than a mile away from the house downtown Kalamazoo, just in an old area that hasn't been maintained a whole lot, in a thicket alongside the road. And that is elderberry, which you see flowering here, along with Jerusalem artichoke and groundnut, Apios americana. This is actually found all over in our hedgerow, but this is a particularly nice visible example of it. I wanted to get a little bit of a close-up so we can see it. There's groundnut getting what it needs in terms of photosynthesis, growing right next to Jerusalem artichoke here, and right here we have another flower from elderberry. You also saw some wild onions growing in there, and right up here is a wild plum. Whoop. Along the ground here, there are also wild strawberries growing, and all of these are very happy with almost no maintenance growing into this thicket-type ecology. We have some native nitrogen fixers growing in there, along with marshmallow, one of our favorite vegetables, valerian, a high-value medicinal herb, some variety of culinary herbs just kind of fill in the gaps in here. There's milkweed growing both as a vegetable and a habitat plant. More nitrogen fixers over on this side. We have some lovely nettle, a wonderful vegetable growing underneath this peach. So there you have it. You know, people always say you can't have a no-work or low-work garden. And they're not wrong. In fact, I agree with that completely. And yet, you can go out almost wherever you are, and you can find an abundance of diverse wild foods growing with no human inputs or maintenance. And it was actually that insight that was the basis for the creation of permaculture. And when Bill Mollison was asked, does it work? He would always answer, do plants grow?